Hey everyone, today we're back with the public forum curriculum guide, and today we're going to be talking about Crossfire, so how you can ask and answer questions. In public forum, we're going to be talking about what is a crossfire, which speakers participate in a crossfire, and what a good crossfire should look like. So let's start with what is a crossfire. So crossfire is a form of mutual cross-examinations in which debaters both ask and answer questions. So as opposed to policy where only one side is asking questions and the other side is answering, in public forum, both sides are going to be asking questions and answering questions, alternating who asks. So Crossfire is going to take place after each set of speeches. And so that's after each constructive, after the rebuttals, and after the summary speech. And this is after both speakers or both sides have spoke in that round. So and then finally, in Crossfire, each side is going to talk about, or each side is going to ask and answer questions about the debate. Usually the team who spoke last in league tournaments, this is going to be the con side, is always going to ask the first question. So you should always know who's going to be asking the first question going into any league tournament. You shouldn't have to ask. And after the first question is asked, which is asked by the con first speaker after the constructive speeches, both teams are just going to alternate asking and answering questions. So an example of a crossfire is that Caden and Simeon just finished their constructive speeches. Simeon, who is the con side, he spoke last, so he's going to ask the first question. So if Caden answers the question, then Caden is going to ask a question of his own. That's alternating that, and they can alternate until time expires. Sometimes you won't have a question, in which case you can ask the other side if they have another question to ask you. It's okay to not have questions, but you should come in prepared to have enough questions to ask the other side. So which debaters are going to be participating in the crossfire? The key is that whoever just gave the last speech is going to participate inside of the crossfire. So there's two crossfires in Puff, or three crossfires. The first two are just a regular 1 versus 1 crossfire, which take place after the constructives and the rebuttals. In the grand crossfire, everybody is going to be participating in this one. That the person who spoke last, so it's usually the con side, and the second speaker is going to take the lead for this questioning period. Note that all crossfires are 3 minutes, and these 3 minutes should go pretty quickly. So what is a good crossfire? So crossfire is going to aim to do 3 things. First is to get information from your judge, get information from your opponents, and lastly, to defend your own arguments or to attack those of your own. So whenever you're doing a crossfire, you're going to try to make organized, and you're trying to make arguments, but you aren't supposed to be quoting evidence inside of the crossfire itself. Unless you're asked something about if your opponent wants you to quote more evidence, you should, but otherwise you should really be attacking and making arguments of your own. So these are just some tips to make a good crossfire. And so first, if you want to stay organized, your team should not talk over the other team. This is a really, really common mistake that just doesn't reflect good on anyone in the round. So it's really important to be respectful, which is the third tip here. And then you shouldn't ask excessive follow-up questions. You really just have one question. It should be a 1-part question. There shouldn't be a second part to it. And that's your turn. And then it alternates again, which is the 4th tip. And then lastly, to make sure that you're organized, you should answer your questions as precisely and concisely as possible. Remember that 3 minutes does go pretty quickly when you're asking and answering questions, and both sides should get an even amount of numbers or an even amount of questions and answers in. So be sure that you answer as precisely and concisely as possible. And then when you want to make your crossfire make an argument, make sure that you're asking clear and specific questions. That's really important for the judge, so the judge knows why you're asking the question in the first place. Secondly, is you should also focus on 1 or 2 arguments. Once again, time is short here, that you should be focusing on what you think is going to help you win the case. And then last, or second to last, you should reference evidence or research that supports your argument. So if the opposing team asks you about some sort of fact and you have evidence to back something up, you can say that inside of the round. And lastly, you should avoid open-ended questions or yes or no questions. So what we're aiming for in a good crossfire is that you are making a point with every single question that you have. Hopefully these tips have been helpful, and good luck with your crossfires in the future.